Those opposed will say no. In the opinion of the chair, the noes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I would request a record roll call vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having arisen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 5-minute vote.
This is a vote on final passage of the cybersecurity bill. A story from the Associated Press says that House Republicans are pushing ahead with legislation to protect the nation's critical infrastructure and corporations from electronic attacks, despite Obama administration objections that the legislation fails to protect American civil liberties. Instead, the administration backs a Senate bill sponsored by Senators Lieberman and Collins that would give the Homeland Security Department the authority to establish security standards. In a statement, Senators Lieberman, Collins, Rockefeller, and Feinstein said the government applies safety standards for cars, food, building structures, and toys, to name a few. Why not do the same thing for infrastructure that powers our economy and provides us with the highest standard of living in the world? A statement from those senators.
248. The nays are 1.
Mr. Tipton. Off no on aye for Mr. Tipton. Mr. Hoyer. Off aye on no for Mr. Hoyer.
On this vote, the yeas are 248, the nays are 168. The bill is passed. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The unfinished business is on the question of suspending the rules and passing H.R. 2050, which the clerk will report by title.
Union Calendar number 304, H.R. 2050, a bill to authorize the continued use of certain water diversions located on National Forest System land in the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness and the Selway Bitterroot Wilderness in the state of Idaho and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill? So many as are in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, 2/3 being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended and the bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The House will be in order. Asked to clear the well of the House, to take their seats. Thank you. The House will come to order. Are asked to please take their seats, clear the well of the House, and take their conversations off the floor. Members are asked to please take their seats, please take their conversations from the floor of the House. For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that in the engrossment of the bill H.R. 3523, the clerk be authorized to make such technical and conforming changes as necessary to reflect the actions of the House.
Objection? Without objection, so ordered.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that in the engrossment of H.R. 3523, the clerk be authorized to make the change that I have placed at the desk.
The clerk will report.
Insert deny access to or before degrade in each place it appears.
Is there objections? Without objection, so ordered. Okay. Without objection, so ordered. Pursuant to Clause 8 of Rule 20, the Chair will postpone further proceedings today on the motion to suspend the rules on which a recorded vote or the yeas and nays are ordered, or on which the vote incurs objection under Clause 6 of Rule 20. Any record vote on the postponed question will be taken later. For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I move that the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4257 as amended.
The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4257, a bill to amend Chapter 35 of Title 44 United States Code to revise requirements relating to federal information security and for other purposes.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from California, Mr. Issa, and the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Cummings, each will control 20 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield myself to the time as I may consume. Madam Chair, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days within which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on the bill under consideration.
Without objection, so ordered.
Madam Speaker, I also ask unanimous consent that the floor statement made by the Honorable Ralph Hall, Chairman of the Committee on Science, Space and Technology, be inserted in the record at this time.
With objection, so ordered.
I thank the Speaker. I yield myself. I already did. Madam Speaker, cybersecurity threats represent one of the most serious national security and economic challenges we face as a nation. Whether it's criminal hackers, organized crime, terrorist networks, or national states, our nation is under siege from dangerous cybersecurity threats that grow daily in frequency and sophistication. It is critical that the federal government address cybersecurity threats in a manner that keeps pace with the nation's growing dependence on technology. The President himself recently stated, cybersecurity is a challenge that we as a government or as a country are not adequately prepared to counter. Madam Speaker, it is essential that we in fact change that here today. Current law does not adequately address the nature of today's cybersecurity threats. Since its enactment in 2002 of the Federal Information Security Management Act, or FISMA, it has become a check-the-box compliance activity that all too often has little to do with minimizing security threats. And yet the Government Accountability Office recently found that security incidents among 24 key agencies increased more than 650% during the last 5 years. To address the rising challenge posed by cyber threats, Ranking Member Cummings and I introduced H.R. 4257, the Federal Information Security Amendments Act of 2012. The bill aims to the bill aims to harness the last decade of technological innovation and security in securing the federal information systems. It amends FISMA to move beyond the check-the-box compliance mentality. It enhances the current framework for securing federal information technology systems. Our bill calls for automated and continuous monitoring. I repeat, Madam Speaker, automated and continuous monitoring of government information systems. Madam Speaker, the House is not in order.
The gentleman is correct. The House is not in order. The gentleman may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it ensures the control, monitoring finally incorporates regular threat assessment. And, Madam Speaker, this is the most important part of what we do. Continuous monitoring and constant threat assessments so that never again will we find that the incidents are going up double digits every month in some cases. The bill also reaffirms the role of the Office of Management Budget, or OMB, with respect to FSMA, recognizing that budgetary leverage the Executive Office of President is necessary to ensure agencies are focused on effective security of its IT systems. While our bill does not include new requirements, restrictions, or mandates on private or non-federal computer systems, H.R. 4257 does highlight the need for stronger public-private partnerships. Through our website, keepthewebopen.com, our bill has been vetted by the American people. It has also received strong support from cybersecurity experts and industries, including the Information Technology Industry Council and the Business Software Alliance. I'd like to thank my ranking member, Mr. Cummings, for a one-on-one equal partnership with me in the efforts to address the growing threat for cybersecurity. He has led the way on his side of the aisle, and I have been honored to serve on my side. We have encouraged all members to support this timely legislation. We recognize that some things are too important to be partisan. This certainly is one of them, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, first of all, I'd like to express my appreciation to the chairman of our committee, first of all, for his kind words and for his cooperation. I start by thanking him for working with me and my staff to make this a bipartisan effort, and it is truly a bipartisan effort. From the beginning, we agreed that we did not want to make securing our federal information systems a partisan issue, and that securing our nation against a cyber attack is an issue that transcends any party lines. This bill is evidence of the good work that we can do when we work together to address an important issue like cybersecurity. Not only does this bill enjoy bipartisan support, but it is non-controversial. Last week, the bill was marked up in committee and passed on a voice vote. The only amendments considered made constructive changes to the bill that were recommended by the National Institutes of Standards and Technology and the Government Accountability Office. These changes enjoyed universal support in committee. This legislation will ensure that federal agencies use a risk-based approach to defend against cyber attacks and protect government information from being compromised by our adversaries. The bill would make key changes to help protect our federal information systems from cyber attacks. It would shift the federal government to a system of continuous monitoring of information systems, streamline reporting requirements, and ensure that agencies take a smart, risk-based approach to securing networks. This bill will continue to authorize the Office of Management and Budget to set federal policy for information security. This is important because we need to hold all agencies accountable for developing appropriate standards and living up to them. However, nothing in this bill would prevent the Department of Homeland Security from continuing the great work it is doing to protect our nation against potential cyber attacks. The Department has dramatically expanded its cybersecurity workforce, and it has built the National Cybersecurity and Communications Integration Center to serve as federal government's cybersecurity command center. This command center is a vital part of our efforts to protect federal information systems. Earlier this month, the head of U.S. Cyber Command, General Keith Alexander, testified that securing our nation against cyber threats is one of our biggest national security challenges. Securing our federal information systems is a critical component of addressing this challenge, and I urge my colleagues to join me and our chairman in supporting this legislation. With that, Madam Speaker, I reserve.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Madam Speaker, we have a speaker on the other side for a colloquy, so I'd reserve at this time to allow him to go next.
I want to thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, I yield the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Connolly, 3 minutes for a colloquy with the chairman.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I thank my friend from Maryland, the distinguished ranking member. I rise to invite Chairman Issa to engage in colloquy.
Colloquy.
I thank the chair. And I want to thank Chairman Issa and appreciate the work he and the ranking member, Mr. Cummings, and their staff on this legislation, which I think is a thoughtful bipartisan update to an information security bill actually written by my predecessor and the chairman's, Tom Davis of Virginia. The FSMA Amendments Act transitions from compliance to performance metrics to address major shortcomings in federal agency cybersecurity implementation. Of course, when considering the performance of federal agencies, it's natural extension to question the relationship between the executive branch and those agencies and the relationship among technology and cybersecurity-related positions within the executive branch. I appreciate President Obama's focus on technology, particularly the Chief Information Officer's 25-point plan, but I'm concerned that the current ad hoc nature of the CIO, CTO, and cybersecurity coordinator could create certain risk and continuity of operations challenges when we look out to the future administrations. I would ask Chairman Issa if he shares those concerns, and I yield.
I thank the gentleman, and I do share those concerns and appreciate the gentleman's work on this. Proper organization of the executive branch is essential to a successful long-term management of technology and particularly cybersecurity. This policy is going to require additional work. FSMA is not the end, but in fact a starting point, and I look forward to working with the gentleman to make sure that as we work with the executive branch, including OMB, that we get it right, we keep the focus where it needs to be on all the agencies and bringing them together. And I thank the gentleman. Yield back.
Madam Speaker, I thank the chairman and look forward to working with him and the ranking member, as well as Mr. Langevin of Rhode Island, who's been a leader on this subject, to advance legislation that will address executive branch organization in the context of cybersecurity. With the right framework, I believe the current and future administrations will be able to more efficiently implement these FSMA reforms and other related legislation. Given its jurisdiction, the Oversight and Government Reform Committee is the appropriate venue to develop such legislation, and I look forward to working with the committee chair and ranking member to advance it. I thank the chairman and the speaker and the ranking member, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time.
Madam Speaker,
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
I yield the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin, 3 minutes for a colloquy with the chairman.
The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise to engage in a colloquy with my colleague and friend, the chairman of the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform, Mr. Issa. I'd first like to thank the chairman for his hard work. His efforts to update the Federal Information Security Management Act have been commendably inclusive and bipartisan, and I want to thank him and his staff, as well as Mr. Cummings and Mr. Connolly and their staff, for all the outreach and good faith negotiation that's occurred during the crafting of this legislation. There can be no question that the FSMA reform language before the House today is both sorely needed and long overdue. To this end, together with my good friend and our former colleague, Ms. Watson, I introduced an amendment that passed the House overwhelmingly last Congress during consideration of the FY 2011 National Defense Authorization Act. That amendment, which was unfortunately stripped out during conference with the Senate, would have made important updates to FSMA in addition to establishing a national office for cyberspace in the Executive Office of the President. Such an office has been recommended by the Obama administration's 60-day cyberspace policy review, public-private sector working groups such as the CSIS Commission on Cybersecurity for the 44th Presidency, which I co-chaired with my good friend Mr. McCall, and the GAO as a response to security deficiencies throughout the federal government. While I applaud my friend for delivering on the need for FSMA reform, I'd like to ask the chairman if he gave thought to such organizational changes within the executive branch, and in particular an organization like a National Office for Cyberspace during the drafting of this legislation. I yield to my
I thank the gentleman, and yes, we did. Your leadership on cybersecurity matters, including FISMA reform, have been essential. When you and I served on the Select Intelligence Committee, I recognize that you put more time and effort into the behind the door work than any of us. And in fact, you and I share some of the challenges that we face with the DNI and other earlier organizations, but I share with you that your suggestions on how we can in fact find single point accountability in future legislation in concert with this administration is essential. I look forward to working with you on exactly that. I know of no other partner I could have on the other side of the aisle that is more prepared to do it, and I thank the gentleman.
Well, I thank the gentleman for that. In that spirit, I'd like to encourage the gentleman to continue in this open and bipartisan fashion. I'd like to ask if he would be interested in working together on such subsequent legislation, along with Mr. Cummings and Mr. Conley, who have been so involved and thoughtful on this issue. I believe that such legislation should include strong, centralized oversight to protect our nation's critical infrastructure, including budgetary oversight powers, while remaining accountable to Congress. I yield to Mr. Issa.
I couldn't agree with the gentleman more. Your work with our staff has been essential. I look forward to doing exactly that, and I think we have to have that ongoing effort to get to there. I saw the ranking member's head also shaking. I know that we will both look forward to working with you on a bipartisan basis.
Well, I thank the gentleman for that, and I look forward to working with my good friend to ensure that our federal government is properly addressing this critically important issue, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized. The gentleman reserves the
Madam
time.
Speaker,
I
would now like to, yes, thank you. I'd now like to yield to my colleague and the gentleman from Utah, the chairman of the subcommittee that has done so much on, in fact, cybersecurity, Mr. Chaffetz. 3 minutes.
The gentleman from Utah is recognized.
Thank you. And Madam Speaker, I appreciate Chairman Issa and his foresight and leadership on this issue. In driving this forward. This is so important to our country and our nation, and for the federal government to operate properly. Madam Speaker, I also want to thank and recognize the ranking member, Mr. Cummings. Doing so, his unparalleled support and need and just patriotism for what's good for this nation, working together in a bipartisan way. This is what I think the American people want, and this is what they get in this bill. I also want to share the fact that cybersecurity is a real threat. It's a threat to the mom who's got that computer sitting in there in the kitchen and the kids are going every direction, to the most secure infrastructure we have in our federal government. It is imperative that we get this right, because everything from a guy in a van down by the river to nation states, our country is under a constant bombardment and attack, for our intellectual property to trade secrets, to what's going on in this government. And while this is focused on what our government is doing and how it's organized, and it updates the law so that we have the right provisions at the right place and we're doing the right things, we have to be vigilant as a people. So this is focused it doesn't give a new mandate. There's no new mandate upon the American people. There's no mandate upon businesses. What this does is gets the structure for what should happen in the federal government right, and updating and doing things like continuous monitoring, vulnerability assessments, and penetration tests that are done within the federal government. It requires a chief information security officer within these different agencies, and it focuses these efforts upon the director of the OMB. By really putting the focal point on the executive branch within the White House, you will get a much better response, because everything from the Bureau of Indian Affairs to the Department of Defense and everywhere in between, we have to make sure that our systems are updated, because the threat is constant, it is real, it is 24/7, and without these updates, without the constant monitoring, without these types of things, we will be doing a disservice to the American people, and we will not be living up to the commitment that we have to make sure that these networks are secure as they possibly can be. This is something that will be with us not just for the next 6 months, not just for the next year, but for the foreseeable future. And, Madam Speaker, that's why I'm so enthusiastic about this bill. I appreciate the bipartisan nature in which it was done, and I certainly appreciate Chairman Issa and his leadership on this. I'm glad to be part of it. I would encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of this bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Utah yields back. The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
We don't have any additional speakers, so I would yield to the gentleman.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Madam Speaker, with great pleasure, I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman who coordinated so much of the work that we're doing today from multiple committees, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Thornberry.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I thank Chairman Issa for yielding. And, Madam Speaker, I want to commend the Chairman and the Ranking Member for working together and bringing this important bill to the floor. And I also want to commend the gentleman from Utah, Mr. Chavitz, who was a member of our task force and, as the Chairman noted, has done so much work on this. Madam Speaker, this is an important bill on cybersecurity. The FISMA law, passed in 2002, needs to be updated. The growth in number and sophistication of the threats has not been matched by our response, and so laws and policies are increasingly outdated and not able to keep up with the threats faced by federal networks as well as private sector networks. And this bill requires continuous monitoring, as you have heard. The threat is dynamic. It changes. It doesn't work anymore to just check a box and say, I've done this. You have to have that continuous monitoring of what's happening within your networks. That's important for defense of the federal government, but it's also important to be an example for the rest of the country. And in cybersecurity, it seems to me it's particularly important for the federal government to lead by example. I also want to just say that this is an example of an issue, a part of cybersecurity on which everybody agrees needs to happen, and this committee has brought a bipartisan answer. We cannot allow differences that may exist between this body and the other body on other cybersecurity issues to prevent us from taking action, getting something accomplished on something that everybody agrees on. This is one of the things everybody agrees needs to happen. Information sharing, everybody agrees on. Research and development that we'll have tomorrow on the floor, everybody agrees needs to happen. So I appreciate the work of this committee. It's an important bill. It will help make the nation more secure as well as its government, and I hope all members will support it. I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Madam Speaker, at this time I have no other speakers, and I'm prepared to close.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume. Madam Speaker, we are, I think this is, I want to associate myself with all the words that have been said by both sides this evening, because we understand that cybersecurity is so very, very important to our nation. We often look back to 9/11 and we think about what happened in that very short time and how it disrupted our entire nation, taking planes out of the air, causing our world to at least pause. And we saw the damage that was done in a matter of a few minutes. Cybersecurity and the cyber threat is just as great, if not far greater, and it can happen very, very quickly. A cyber attack can take place very, very quickly, and it's something that we must do everything in our power to protect ourselves against. This bill does not solve all the problems, but it certainly leads us in the right direction. And again, I want to thank the chairman, I want to thank everybody involved for the bipartisan effort and making the security of our nation our #1 priority. And with that, I urge all the members to vote for this bill, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Maryland yields back the balance of his time. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Madam Speaker, in closing, I urge all members to support the passage of this bill, H.R. 4257, as amended. And I want to make one closing statement. Often we talk about cybersecurity, and people think about just the Internet. We sit here in a room that is essentially windowless. I've been in this room when the lights are out. It is very, very dark. We would have a hard time finding our way out. And yet, the very essence of keeping the grid up requires computers to talk to each other. Our phone systems, our lights, our power, our sewage, our water, all depend today on interoperable computer systems that span the entire country and in many cases the entire world. So as people realize that the government-to-government relationship, and particularly the public-private partnerships that this bill encourages and asks the Office of Management and Budget to ensure occur, we're doing so, of course, to maintain a reliable Internet, but much more importantly, the fundamentals of the very electricity that powers the Internet must be maintained and protected. And I believe we've gone a long way today in passage of this bill. I urge its passage. I thank the gentleman from Maryland for his leadership on this important matter, and I yield back.
The gentleman from California yields back. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4257 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The Chair will now entertain 1-minute request. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas arise?
Ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, in the quiet town of Woodsocket, Rhode Island, a 91-year-old memorial honoring hometown soldiers stands tall outside a local fire station. A stone-bottom statue with a cross on top immortalizes the fallen heroes who sacrificed so much for our country. For decades, the memorial has stood in the shadows of the fire station with no complaints from local residents. But a group of out-of-towners, not from Woonsocket, not even from Rhode Island, but from 1,000 miles away in Wisconsin, have self-righteously objected to the cross on top of the 91-year-old memorial. The anti-religious hate group demands the cross be removed. They also demand the firefighter's prayer and angel from the Woonsocket Fire Department website be removed. Madam Speaker, the firefighter prayer asks God to give them strength to save lives and to protect the families of the firefighters. County officials will not succumb to the intimidation tactics of the bigoted group. The mayor has said he will not remove the cross under any circumstances because the Constitution protects the free exercise of religion, whether this hate group likes it or not. And that's just the way it is.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Nevada arise?
I rise to address the House for 1 minute and to possibly revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, it's hard to believe that in the 21st century, women in Nevada are still making only 83 cents for every dollar that a man makes. What does that mean in real terms? It means a difference of $7,326 a year. It is not fair. In most cases, working women in Nevada are either the primary or the sole breadwinners of their family. And that's why I'm calling on the Speaker to follow the Senate's lead and schedule a vote on the Paycheck Fairness Act, legislation that will help close the unacceptable wage gap between men and women in this country. Unfortunately, far too many in the House and the Senate are still living in the dark ages when it comes to basic fairness for women. Women in Nevada are still shaking their heads in disbelief that in the year 2012, one of the major debates in this Congress was whether to restrict access to birth control. And now there are those in the House and Senate who have voted time and time again against enforcing equal pay for equal work. It's time for this Congress to join the rest of us in the 21st century. Let's get the Paycheck Fairness Bill on the floor and let's vote yes. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. The Chair lays before the House the following personal request.
Leave of absence requested for Mr. Davis of Kentucky for today and for April 27th.
Without objection, the request is granted. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5, 2011, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Poe, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Tonight, myself and other members of the House are going to talk about energy issues in the United States. Probably a timely thing to start with is a recent comment by one of the individuals who works for the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. And the more we learn about the EPA, the more we learn that they are hostile to real American energy for various reasons. Let me give you some historical perspective that makes this continuous assault on the oil and gas industry make sense to us now in 2012. It seems that back in 2010, 2 years ago, EPA Region 6 Administrator Al Armendariz stood up on his bureaucratic pedestal of power and spelled out the true intentions that he had and the goals of the EPA. He declared that the EPA, and declared this from his marble palace here in Washington, D.C., that the EPA would target the oil and gas industry, calling it an enforcement priority, as if, Madam Speaker, the oil and gas industry is made up of criminals. He went on, and I quote, "I was in a meeting once, and gave an analogy to my staff about my philosophy of enforcement. And I think it was probably a little crude and maybe not appropriate for the meeting, but I'll just go ahead and tell you what I said." And here's what he said, Madam Speaker. It was kind of like how the Romans used to do. You know, conquer villages in the Mediterranean. They'd go into a little Turkish town somewhere, they'd find the first 5 guys they saw, and they'd crucify him. That's right, they would crucify him, as if he is advocating crucifying the oil and gas industry. What a thing to say from somebody that works for the federal government. He said he would make examples out of the people in the oil and gas industry. Probably unknown to him, his speech was all caught on videotape that recently surfaced. In fact, it was on the Internet, YouTube, last night. But today, mysteriously, it seems to have disappeared and is no longer on YouTube. That was in 2010. These comments help us understand the EPA's belligerent attitude against energy, American energy, against the oil and gas industry. What came after was one of the most aggressive assaults on the oil and gas industry we've ever seen. The EPA is at war with Texas, as a Wall Street Journal editorial once said. I think the EPA probably should change their name to the War Department, because they are at war with America's energy. They certainly aren't concerned as much about the environment as they are about putting American energy out of business. Madam Speaker, the oil and gas industry supports 9.2 million jobs in the United States. I wonder how many of those workers Mr. Armendariz wants to crucify, all in the name of his political agenda. Madam Speaker, we need a fair EPA, one that brings a balanced approach to the environment and to our energy industry. An attack on the energy industry is an attack really on American people and American jobs. Mr. Armendariz seems to be at war with America. He does not want to really help the oil and gas industry become environmentally safe. It seems to me he wants to kill it. And the effort will kill American jobs, kill our energy, and kill our national security. The video also shows he is not concerned about real science, not about true environmental science, or really the facts. He just hates the oil and gas industry. So, Madam Speaker, he needs to go. He needs to be replaced with someone that cares more about the environment than personal crusades against industry. And at this time, Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to have in the record a Forbes article that was published today regarding the EPA official that I just mentioned.
Without objection.
I'm going to continue my comments about America's energy by talking a little bit about gasoline and gasoline prices. I ask members, people back in Texas, in southeast Texas, where I live, how rising gasoline prices have affected them personally. And I want to give the House the benefit of some of those statements made by American people about the high cost of gasoline and maybe some things that we can do about high cost of gasoline. Here's what they have said, and I'll take them one at a time. One individual from Southeast Texas says, I spend more money on gasoline than I do on groceries. Another, living in Texas requires driving greater distances to get anything. We have no choice but to purchase gas, and it definitely cuts into our food budget. You see, Madam Speaker, west of the Mississippi, there are vast places, as the Speaker knows, where people roam and live in the rural areas, and it takes them a long time to get from point A to point B, especially when they're going to work sometimes, whether they work on the ranch or whether they work in small towns in America. And so because of that greater distance, a lot of Americans don't realize that the only mode of transportation for some Americans is to drive a vehicle. That's how they get to work. They don't drive subways. They don't ride bicycles. They don't have the opportunity to walk to work because they live in the vastness of the West. I'll continue. 70% of all businesses requires people to have discretionary income that's being siphoned off by higher gas, taxes, fees, and it's only getting worse because of high gasoline prices. I continue. Another says, as a retiree, high gasoline prices affects everything I do. Travel, possible vacation plans are no longer being discussed in our family. Anything I do is planned well so as to cut down on how much I drive, what I buy, because it is priced so high in the stores. The price in stores has tripled because stores are having to pay higher fuel prices to get their market or get their products to market. Another one says, I drive for a living and it hurts. I continue. Another Texan has written me and said, I drive 175 miles round trip to work every day. I work for the Corps of Engineers and the government doesn't give me 1 red cent for gasoline. It costs me $900 a month for gasoline that I used to could use somewhere else. Amazing number. $900. That's, in some cases, that's how much people pay on the rent on their house or an apartment. And yet we have one American doing his job, working for the people of this country, spending that much money just on gasoline. Another individual wrote me and he said, I can't afford to commute. But by my long hours as a business owner, it makes it impossible to take mass transit or a carpool. So I have no alternative, since I have no carpool, no mass transits, but I have to drive to get to work because I'm a business owner. And the gasoline is driving me out of business. Another one has said, I drive 75 miles a day round trip for work. Plus, I pay $7 in tolls. Yeah, it's hurting. I love my job, but it's getting to the point that what money I make is going straight back into the gas tank. Another citizen has said, I drive a 2000 Ford F-150 as my work vehicle. It's draining my wallet, but I need a full-size truck for my job. Once again, in the West, a lot of folks drive pickup trucks. They don't only just drive them to work, that is their work vehicle. They use that in their job. It is their office. They don't have the luxury, as some do, to work in tall skyscrapers in an office as we consider an office. Their truck is their vehicle. And F-150s is the standard operating vehicle, at least in Texas and in other parts of the country. By the way, it's the #1 selling vehicle in the United States. But Americans need to understand, and the government needs to understand, that's what Americans drive. That is their work vehicle in many cases. And high gasoline prices affects their quality of life. And maybe we as a body ought to do something about gasoline that is now $4 a gallon. Another citizen told me last month I spent $600 on gas for my truck versus just $300 a few years ago. Customers don't understand that the materials are going up due to the rising costs, and the suppliers are raising the price to recoup the loss due to fuel prices that are skyrocketing for them. And that's correct. What we pay at the grocery store or at any store where we do business for a product, part of the cost of that product is getting it to market so Americans can buy it. And it's costing more to get goods and services to market because gasoline prices. And of course, gasoline prices affect the price of goods, and therefore that is passed on to the consumer, the people in America who live here. Another one says, where do I begin? I hated it, but I had to go from a 4Runner to a Corolla to handle my commute to work every day. Another one says, since 2002, my food bill has gone from $95 a week for a full cart of groceries, I suspect, to $130 per week for half a cart of groceries. We are making more but keeping less. High gasoline prices affects my quality of life. Another one says, I have spent less on food so I can fill up 3 times a week at approximately $75 to $80 a tank. Another citizen wrote me his concerns. I had to find another job closer to home because it's getting ridiculous, the cost of gasoline. An individual who uses his truck in his business said this, I drive a hotshot delivery truck and I have to pay my own fuel. We do get a fuel surcharge, but it does not even come close to paying for the fuel. I spend $200 to $250 a week on fuel over what the surcharge pays me, and it's killing me. That's what Americans are saying about gasoline prices. These are people who work every day, support their families, and yet gasoline affects them in personal ways. Another individual told me, wrote me about his religion is being affected, his religious commitment is being affected by the cost of gasoline. Here's what he says. Because the church my family and I attend is 30 minutes away, we've chosen to attend Wednesday night church services closer to home. Also, we've had to give up 2 church service meetings during the week. It's upsetting for my fellow members to ask me on Sundays if I've left the church. It's also harder to maintain those close ties, not seeing fellow members but once a week. And it's all due to high gasoline prices. Another Southeast Texan writes this comment to me. We certainly have less disposable income, as the phrase goes, and that means less money to spend in various businesses in our city because of the high cost it costs my family to buy gasoline. Another one says this, I've cut out everything extra. Dine out less, fewer trips, stay at home for entertainment, prices of food have tripled, and I stretch leftovers as far as possible because of gas prices. Another citizen and neighbor says, I only drive where I have to. I shop at Kroger to get extra cents off of gas. The Kroger grocery store gives people a deduction if they buy gasoline from Kroger, and they have a little Kroger card. We just stay at home more than ever. And a fisherman says this, I am a commercial fisherman. Gas prices hurt at the pump, and it has in turn driven up the prices for supplies, and it's even driven up the price and cost of bait. Another one lastly says this, makes this comment. It's just hard to make it these days because of high gas prices. So gasoline prices, which we're not talking a whole lot about now, some Americans have just accepted it as the new normal. I refuse to do that. I refuse to accept high gasoline prices. I'm old enough to remember when gasoline cost, I don't want to shock the speaker because you're a whole lot younger than I am, but I remember when I could fill up my Chevy 2 Super Sport back in the early 70s for 26 cents a gallon. I know that shocks you, but gasoline prices have gone up. And of course, in my generation, as Mr. Burton from Indiana knows, when gasoline hit 30 cents a gallon, we all were shocked about it. And now we're paying $4 a gallon. We don't have to accept that. And the reason we don't have to accept it, because sitting over here are America's natural resources, our God-given natural resources, just waiting to be developed. But as I mentioned earlier, we got these bureaucrats down the street in their marble palaces called the EPA, and they regulate more than just light bulbs. They're regulating the oil and gas industry out of business. And I think it's a personal vendetta that they have for some reason. So there are things we should do, things we can do, and it's important that we discuss those, and we'll continue to discuss those tonight with my colleagues. I do want to yield some time to my friend and colleague, Mr. Burton from Indiana, for as much time as he wishes to consume.
Well, first of all, I want to thank my good friend Congressman Poe of Texas for putting a face on the problem of high energy prices and high gasoline prices. I mean, when I listened to all the things that you were reading there from your constituents about not being able to go to work or buying huge amounts of gas 2 or 3 times a week, it just breaks your heart. And then people think, you know, I went to the store the other night and I bought 2 oranges. They were on sale. They were $1 a piece. 2 oranges, $1 a piece. Now, the reason for that is not just because they're growing them and it's costing more. It's because the transportation by diesel trucks and gasoline-powered trucks has gone up so much that they have to pass that on to the consumers with higher prices. And if you talk to any man or woman who goes to the store, they'll tell you that they're feeling it when they buy their groceries, as well as at the gas pump. I'd like to tell you a little story real quick, though. You'll find this humorous, because you talked about gasoline being 20-some cents when you were a little bit younger. I presume it was a little bit younger. We were on a trip with some friends of ours, and we went to an island down off the coast of Florida in the Caribbean. And this friend of mine, we rented 2 motorcycles, little motor scooters, to go out to the corner of the island. And gasoline was on the island was very high. It was 50 cents a gallon. And he says, I'm not paying 50 cents a gallon for gasoline. And so we took what we had in the sickles and we rode out there, and he ran out of gasoline. And so we had to get a coffee can and turn one sickle upside down to get enough gasoline in his sickle to get back. Well, we couldn't get my sickle turned back on. And so he tried to pull me and my motorcycle with my wife on the back with a string back to the hotel where we were staying. And we couldn't do it. It about broke my finger off, so they left me at a Portuguese gasoline station, where nobody spoke English, and they didn't understand a thing I was saying. My face was burned to a pulp from the sun, and I ended up not getting back until late that night with about a 3rd-degree burn because he wouldn't pay 50 cents for a gallon of gas. Imagine what he would think today, having to pay $4 for a gallon of gas. Poor guy would just die. Let me just look at this chart. My colleague was talking just a moment ago, and I wish all the people in America, if I could talk to them, could see this chart. And it shows that back in the early part of the Obama administration, gasoline was about $2.68 a gallon, and now it's, in some parts of the country, it's over $4 a gallon. It's killing the economy. It's killing people who have to go to work, as Congressman Poe said. And we have the resources to deal with it. Now, the thing I wanted to talk about real quickly was, and I talked to Congressman Poe about this, the Interior Secretary, Mr. Salazar, as well as the head of the EPA and the Energy Department, are having an all-out assault on members of Congress who are pointing out that we have energy in this country that can be tapped to lower the price of energy. But they're attacking us, saying that we're just raising red herrings and not dealing with the problems as we should. So I'm going to read this to you. Mr. Salazar, the head of the Interior Department, says, it's in this imagined energy world where we see this growing and continued divide in the energy debate in America. But the divide is not among ordinary Americans. It's between some people in Washington. I guess they mean you and me, Congressman Poe. He says it's a divide between the real energy world that we work in every day and the imagined fairy tale world. And the President of the United States has said on a number of occasions that we're doing more drilling right now than we ever have, and that the American people are being misled. So in addition to the chart I have on gasoline prices, I brought this chart down. And this chart, Congressman Poe, shows the number of applications for permits to drill and how they've been affected since the Obama administration has taken place. So I just want to go through these facts. And if the President were paying attention, and if I were talking to him, but I know I can't, but if I were talking to him, I'd say, Mr. President, these are the facts. And I don't know who's giving you your facts down there at the White House, but Mr. President, you ought to take a look at these facts because they're accurate. First of all, according to the American Petroleum Institute, the number of new permits to drill issued by the Bureau of Land Management is down by 40%. Down by 40% from an average of over 6,400 permits in 2007 and 8 to an average of 3,962 in 2009 to 10. That's down by almost 40%. So we're not drilling where we can. They're not issuing the permits. During this same period, the number of new wells drilled on federal land have declined, gone down. The number of oil wells have gone down by 40%, and the number of new federal oil and gas leases issued by the Bureau of Land Management is down by almost 50%. So is it any wonder we're not going after our resources? We're depending on the Saudis, the people in South America and Venezuela, many of whom don't like us very much, and as a result, we're paying more and more and more at the pump. President Obama says that the oil production is at an all-time high during his administration. However, the fact is oil production on federal land fell by 11% last year, and oil production on private and state-owned land where they couldn't touch it did go up a little bit, and that's what he's talking about. Where the government has control over permits, they're not letting us drill. Federal lands hold an estimated 116 billion barrels of recoverable oil, enough to produce gasoline for 65 million cars and fuel oil for 3.2 million households for 60 years. Western oil shale deposits alone are estimated to contain up to 5 times the amount of Saudi oil reserves. 70% of this oil shale is on federal land, and we can't get to it because the President and his administration will not let us. According to a recent CRS report, there are over 21.6 million acres of land leased by the federal government that are not currently producing oil or who have not been approved for exploration. Returning to the levels of 2007 and 2008, when the administration started, federal leasing and permitting levels would have projected an increase of 7 million to 13 million barrels per year of domestic oil production, but they cut it back. According to the American Petroleum Institute, an estimated 12,000 to 30,000 American jobs would be created in energy-producing western states over the next 4 years if we just went back to where we were drilling in 2007 and 2008. And furthermore, the Keystone XL pipeline, which the President has stopped it dead, it would bring to our economy thousands of new jobs and transport 830,000 barrels of oil to American refineries, which would be converted into oil and gasoline that would help this economy and lower gas prices. With gas prices, as my colleague said, very, very, very high, over $4 a gallon, and in some places here in Washington, it was up to $5 a gallon not too long ago. With gas prices that high and affecting every American, it's clear that the United States needs to become more energy independent and signal to the world that the U.S. is open to production. And if we started drilling where we can and exploring where we can, make no mistake, the people who sell oil to us will lower the price because they want to be competitive and they don't want to lose market share. Whether it's the administration dragging its heels on approving permits for offshore drilling or drilling on federal land, not opening up land for exploration, or not approving the Keystone Pipeline, this administration, the Obama administration's policies, are failing everyday Americans and costing millions in potential government revenue and thousands of new jobs. So no matter what the administration people are saying, like Mr. Salazar or the EPA or the Energy Department, the fact is we have enough energy in this country to move toward energy independence over the next 5 to 10 years. But this administration wants to go to new sources of energy like windmills and solar panels and geothermal and nuclear. And all those things are important. But while we're starting to transition to new sources of energy, we need to use the energy that we have, which would lower the cost of energy to the average citizen and lower the price of gasoline so people, as Mr. Poe has said, could get to work and live a competent, fair, friendly life. And with that, Mr. Poe, thank you so much for giving me this time. I'm a big admirer of yours, buddy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Burton, for your comments. I appreciate the gentleman from Indiana. Several comments about what you said is important. The